Hello, and welcome back for another online video lecture. Today, I want to discuss comparative analysis for my Composition 2 students. Essay 2 requires you to analyze two texts. The texts that you can choose from include any essay from your textbook, any movie that both you and I have viewed, and any song. You can mix and match. For example, you could analyze an essay alongside a movie, or you could analyze a song alongside an essay. The choice is yours. Please remember that if you choose to analyze a movie, you need to have my approval because it needs to be a movie that you and I have both watched. For Essay 2, we're adding to your knowledge regarding argument. In Essay 1, you analyzed a singular text for the components of argument. In Essay 2, you are going to be comparing and contrasting two texts. You can use components of argument, or you can add other things, such as issues related to literature and critical lensing. Now that we've discussed which text that you can choose from, let's look at the instructions themselves. Please pull out your instruction sheet. Let's read together. You have been studying how to define rhetoric and discern society's uses for rhetoric. Another term for rhetoric is discourse. Thus far, you have learned that rhetoric persuades others to believe a perspective and accept the argument's asserted claim, subclaims, evidence, warrants, and assumptions. And you have learned that rhetoric can be analyzed for various opinions regarding a topic, such as abortion, gun control, free medical care, gender inequality, and pay inequality. This tracking of opinions is commonly referred to as the continuum of opinion or the continuum of discourse. Daily conversations, society, and media affects the trajectory of all discourses. For this essay, you need to compare two texts that are listed on the course calendar. These texts can be written stories, movies, songs, or pieces of art. You can choose two texts of the same genre, or you can choose two texts that are from different genres. The choice is yours. While you are pondering which two texts to compare, you should contemplate the issues, themes, and critical lenses that you have learned thus far in this course. Please reference class handouts, class lecture notes, and Arguing About Literature, pages 54 through 56, 102 and 103, and 283 through 289. These pages will provide you with a comprehensive list regarding the issues and critical lenses that you must use for Essay 2. What issues, themes, or critical lenses do you find intriguing? Use this as a springboard, a place to begin your brainstorming. For example, if you enjoyed psychological texts, you could choose Daniel Orsico's Orientation, which you would find in your textbook Arguing About Literature on pages 47 through 51. You could compare and contrast it to Charlotte Perkin Gilman's The Yellow Wallpaper, also found in the same textbook on pages 244 to 257. You could compare these texts through a psychoanalytical lens. Maybe you enjoy texts that discuss issues regarding the physical body or a deconstruction lens. You could choose to compare Kevin Kinghorn's Questions of Identity, Is Hulk the Same Person as Bruce Banner?, located in Superheroes and Philosophy, pages 223 through 236. And nearly any superhero movie, such as Superman, Batman, Spider-Man, Thor, X-Men, and Wolverine. The possibilities are endless. I'm sure you can find something that interests you. Let me reiterate. You are comparing two texts. You get to choose the text that you want to compare. These texts can be located in your textbooks for this course, or you can choose a movie that both you and I have watched, or you can choose a song. Using these two texts, you're going to add to what you've already learned about argument, which is claim, subclaims, evidence, assumption, warrants, and the ethical appeals, logos, pathos, and ethos. Adding to this are the issues that are discussed in arguing about literature, and the critical lenses that are also discussed in arguing about literature. Essay 2 does not restrict you to just the components of argument. You can look at themes such as good versus evil, or love, friendship, family. You can choose to use a psychoanalytical lens, a deconstructive lens, a new critic lens, a new historical lens. The list is endless. Now that we've discussed that you are going to analyze true text, it is time for you to brainstorm and start your writing process. Permit yourself a 24-hour break from the writing process after a rough draft before you decide to revise that rough draft. Be sure to upload your rough draft to the discussion board, to the rough draft link on Blackboard, and bring your rough draft printed copies already stapled to class. Be sure to arrive on time for peer review day. Essay 2 permits you to think more about your thoughts, about your likes and dislikes. It allows you to identify issues and to make observations and recommendations. It allows you to apply a critical lens that you find enjoying. Please be sure to study the list of issues that we've discussed in class, and be sure to thoroughly read the chapter about critical lenses. I hope this video answers the questions that you have. Let's take a look at some student examples. Let's look at the first example. This is Stephanie Hart's essay titled Not As It Seems. Now remember to apply the steps for rhetorical reading, which involves making sure that the formatting is proper. Read the title, the introduction, and the conclusion, then the first and last sentence of every body paragraph. Let's begin. Not as it seems. Life is supremely complicated, an interconnected web. People create a network of complexity in the ritual of live, breathe, die, repeat. On the surface, the flowing stream of life offers transparent waters, but in society's never-ending quest for depth, the water becomes murky. Because literature reflects human nature, it represents these intricacies in a variety of ways. In his short story, Orientation, Daniel Orsico examines the complexity of people by illustrating a typical office environment, while simultaneously revealing its morbid and disturbing facets. Presenting a different viewpoint, Joe Newman, a member of the indie rock band Alt J, in his song Breeze Blocks, writes of the misconceptions and assumptions that dilute the complexities of a relationship. Together, each piece offers their own perspectives, which are implemented through two major critical lenses, post-colonialism and psychoanalytic, while utilizing multiple themes and appeals to examine one major brooding claim: nothing is ever as it seems. Now that we've read her introduction, let's go read her conclusion. In both pieces, Orsico and Newman divulge into the confines of the human mind where the most simple and complex factors of human nature exist. Through a post-colonial lens, both writers describe aspects of life outside the norms of society, and most notably, both pieces describe the different dimensions of life where people attempt to deal with what is often misunderstood at the surface. Each piece offers emotional and confusing interpretations of human nature, especially in the darkest moments. Nonetheless, the most haunting aspect of each piece is the fine line between reverie and reality. So we can see from reading her introduction and her conclusion, we know that she's going to compare Orsico and Newman. We're going to look at the human mind, discuss human nature. She's going to apply post-colonial lens, and she's going to look at how human nature can be analyzed through this lens. Let's scroll back up to the top of her essay. She states that she's going to use two major critical lenses, postcolonialism and psychoanalytical, that she's going to discuss themes and appeals, and that all of these are going to support her analysis that nothing is as it ever seems. So now we're going to look at her body paragraphs to see if her body paragraphs follow the order of her introduction and conclusion. So let's go to the first body paragraph. Stuck in a disillusioned world, Orozco analyzes the humdrum environment of an office space while divulging into the masochistic tendencies of human nature and incorporating the stereotypes rooted in American society. So she mentioned Orozco first, and she's discussing Orozco first. This is very good organizational structure. She's also reiterating the psychoanalytical part by discussing a disillusioned world, and she's using the repeating words of human nature. Let's look at where she goes next. Through a post-colonial lens, Orozco analyzes the normality of not facing a problem. Discussing uncomfortable topics has rarely been a subject of concern in most societies. Instead, it is best to just whisper about them until the silence becomes too loud to ignore, and even so, it is best just to ignore them too. Orozco offers countless uncomfortable scenes with underlying and undiscussed problems. Often the story compels its readers to become anxious as the narrator divulges into disturbing detail of each person's life. John LaFontaine, for example, is a pervert. Even so, John's actions are simply ignored. He sneaks into the woman's bathroom and, of course, does so without repercussion. John, instead, is pitied as the narrator insists he is harmless, using the bathroom endeavors as a begin thrill, interrupting his sad, uneventful life. So she's made a subclaim, and she's supporting that subclaim with evidence from Orozco's text itself. What she needs to change is that she should refer to John as LaFontaine instead of John, because when you refer to an author or a character, the very first time that you mention somebody, you use the full name. After that, you use the last name. Let's continue to see where she goes. John is excused for his behavior because he certainly has not intended to do wrong. Therefore, because his intentions were not ill-intended, John is not wrong. Annika Bloom, though, is a freak. Her palms bleed and she knows when a person will die. So never talk to Annika Bloom. With assumptions tied to each circumstance, it's easier to resolve the unknown with what can be well understood. This is some very good writing here. So she's using a component of argument, which is assumptions, to analyze the writing that Orozco is doing. So she's tying course terminology into her essay, which is what you're expected to do. Let's continue with her essay. John has inappropriate tendencies, but no one talks about that. And Annika is a witch, but no one talks about that either. And if a person happens to discuss which undiscussable information, well, they may be let go. So here, she is definitely supporting her argument. She's providing evidence, and she's making sure that she's not breaking the 80-20 rule. She's not going over 20% quote usage within her essay. And you can continue to read this paragraph, but let's go to the second body paragraph. While Orozco's style deals with the unusual indirectly by analyzing the peculiar actions of office employees, Joe Newman presents the uncomfortable issues of abuse starkly and ambitiously. So the introductory element is the transition into her second body paragraph. In the second body paragraph, she should have just stated Newman because she stated Joe Newman earlier on in the introduction. So please make sure, as I've said previously, that you reference names appropriately. Let's continue. Newman, like Orzico, successfully utilizes stereotypes, creating a scene where a woman has fallen victim into a man's abuse in the opening verse of the song. So here, the word stereotype is going back to those themes that she is wanting to discuss. Newman chooses to begin his verse with a narrowed lens, writing, "She may contain the urge to run away, but hold her down with soggy clothes and breeze blocks," lines 1 and 2. Writing as though he is giving instruction, Newman is seemingly detached and numb. Nonetheless, the lens widens, and Newman continues in a different direction. In describing an ensuing confrontation, he writes, "muscle to muscle and toe to toe," suggesting the man and woman are on equal ground. Line 10. But he continues with, "The fear has gripped me, but here I go," depicting a scene of desperation. So you can see that she's applying evidence to her subclaim regarding Newman. Let's go down to her next body paragraph. Keeping true to the general claim that nothing is as it seems, this is a repeating phrase back to her main theme, her main claim. She continues, Orsico dives into the assertions that consume employees in orientation. Through a psychoanalytical lens, Orsico examines the themes of exception openly and repeatedly. So now she's letting you know that since she's discussed the first subclaim and applied it to both texts, she's going on to her next subclaim and she's going to apply it to those texts as well. And so if we go down to the next body paragraph, becoming consumed in idealism seems to be the sole theme of Newman's song. So here we see she discussed Orsico, now she's discussing Newman. She provides you with another introductory element to guide you through her argument. Continuing in a scope of psychoanalytic lens, both Orsico and Newman's writings demonstrate how disillusionment gives way to a sense of disassociation. If a natural law of physics states that what goes up must come down, can the reverse also be true? Now, I tend to urge my students not to use questions in their essays, but she has not overly used questions. And in this case, she's trying to guide the argument without using the first person, and she's also guiding the argument in a way and try to provoke a thought process in the reader. So I can see where she's going here, and I just want to say that if you want to use questions in your essay, please use them sparsely. Do not overly rely on your questions. So if we continue to scroll down in her essay, we get to her conclusion, and she reiterates the fact that in both of the pieces, these pieces are doing this. And you can read through her paper. You can also look here at her works cited page. Here is the song that she's referencing. This is the songwriter, and there's more than one songwriter, the title of the song, the album, who published it. And then, of course, she has Orsico's piece, which is from your textbook. So this is Ms. Hart's example. I've walked you through how to incorporate transitions into your body paragraphs, and she used a block-by-block structure, meaning she had a subclaim, so she used the first text, Orsico, in one paragraph. In the paragraph underneath that, she used Newman. She goes to her next subclaim. She begins with Orsico, then Newman. Orsico, Newman, and then she has her conclusion. This is one way in which to structure an argument, is block by block. You can also use point by point if you wish, and that's where within a body paragraph you use one line or more than one line to discuss the first text, and within that same paragraph you would go to the next text. Point by point construction. If you have questions about that, please let me know. Now that we've discussed Ms. Hart's essay, let's take a look at Ms. Payton's essay. Again, let's practice rhetorical reading. We want to read the title, the introduction, the conclusion. We want to check for MLA formatting and the works cited page. So We can see that her title, The Two Chocolatiers. I'm going to scroll down to her works cited page because I want to see what text she's going to analyze. And let's take a look. She's analyzing Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. That was directed by Tim Burton from 2005. And she's looking at Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory from 1971. So we know that we're going to have two different versions of a similar story. Now that we've looked at the works cited page, the title will make a little bit more sense to us, The Two Chocolatiers. We know that we're going to be talking about Willy Wonka, and we are going to be discussing the cinematic narratives within these two movies. So let's move on to reading the introduction and the conclusion. The fantastical story of Willy Wonka and Charlie Bucket have been in movie-going audiences' heads for years. Whether they grew up watching Gene Wilder somersault into the scene or Johnny Depp politely explain cannibalism, the eccentric man is doubtless known to them by name if nothing else. However, despite covering the same story, the directors of these two films have had varied viewpoints on this tale. In Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, director Mel Stewart argues that Wonka is an aloof, morally ambiguous chocolatier trying to find a child that he can trust and greatly reward the child he finds. In Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, director Tim Burton argues that Wonka is a runaway child who never grew up, who goes on to endangered children and eventually reunite with his father. These directors differ in their interpretations of this tale. This makes for a fascinating comparison because even when they agree, they are looking at the same idea from different perspectives. These directors agree on issues of fact, disagree on their choice of themes, and simultaneously agree and disagree on their psychoanalytic critical lens of Willy Wonka. So in that very last sentence, you have her thesis claim. And her thesis claim sets up how the rest of her paper is going to be structured. Let's go on to read her conclusion so that we will know her main points from this essay before we start to read the body paragraphs. Ultimately, Stewart and Burton managed to tell the same story from very different angles. Stewart and Burton compel viewers to question how morally reputable Wonka truly is, giving the audience hints of a darker side that's never fully explored. Burton uses Stewart's theme of goodness, notice the word theme, as a jumping off point rather than an endgame, and deviates again from Stewart's structure when he paints the audience an austere picture of Wonka's childhood. Despite what these directors can and cannot agree on, notice she's acknowledging the continuum of opinion regarding a subject, in this case Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. Audiences can thank them for collaborating in one crucial area. They have both helped ensure that this story will stay relevant for many generations. So Tess is letting us know that the story is still applicable, that it has exegesis. So that's what you want to make sure that you get across to your audience is why should they care about your topic. Now, Ms. Payton's conclusions a little bit shorter than her introduction and probably could have had a little bit more length. She does summarize a lot of her main points. So now let's go and look at her body paragraphs. Now remember, look at the very last sentence of Ms. Payton's essay and you will see her thesis claim. Within her thesis claim are her subclaims. And she's letting you know that the directors agree on issues of fact, but they disagree on themes, while they agree and disagree on how to analyze Willy Wonka. So let's look at her first body paragraph, topic sentence. The issue of fact that both directors take on is Willy Wonka's moral compass. Is Wonka truly malevolent or benevolent? One area that raises this question is both Wonka's lack of genuine concern for the children being endangered in front of them. No moment better exemplifies this than when Stuart's Wonka apathetically repeats phrases that are supposedly meant to warn children. Stop! Don't! Come back! But the children walk straight into danger. She provides the time date stamp, and she also provides the directors. While both Wonkas show empathy for their respective Charlies, they show open disdain for the plights of the other children. Stuart and Burton would have the audience believe that this is okay, because these children are terrible. However, they are still children. Children who take an awful lot after their parents and who are, above all, still learning. The songs of the Oompa Loompas show that both factories' crews are well aware that the children are not entirely at fault. They sing, blaming the kids is a lie and a shame. You know exactly who's to blame, the mother and the father. However, they continue to watch complacently as children are put in various distressing situations. In Stuart's film, the audience never gets to see for themselves that these children are truly all right afterward. In Burton's film, they are shown, but both Mike TV and Violet I don't know how to pronounce her last name, have been permanently changed. Now, I want you to notice what she did here. She says, in Stuart's film, so we know that we're analyzing just Stuart, and then she says, in Burton's film. So we have point by point. In the first essay that we looked at, Ms. Hart used block by block. Ms. Payton is combining block by block with some point by point because she's trying to stay focused on a particular subclaim. Let's continue. Despite both Wonka's lack of empathy for these children, the end note of these films tells the audience that the chocolatier is either a mentor or appear to be loved. This begs the question, which of these opposing impressions is the audience to judge these Wonkas by? Now remember, I told you to be very careful with questions. So I understand what Ms. Payton is doing here. She wants you to think about this question. There could have been other ways that she could write it. She could have said the authors are begging the question, use the colon, write it out. But here it makes it seem like that she's posing a question. Let's look at the next paragraph. These hints of possible malevolence expand past Wonka's empathy and are scattered throughout both films. So now we know we're going to talk about both films. Burton's Wonka appears to frantically search through his keys in an attempt to save Veracute, but Wonka calmly selects the right one only after the damage has been done. Also, upon hearing that his glass elevator is about to shatter, he laughs at the thought. Despite the danger this puts his guest in, Wonka crash lands the glass elevator in Charlie's house. Then Wonka leaves without offering to help the family fix it. Indeed, the audience sees that the Bucket family has to do it themselves. As for Stuart's Wonka, so we're in one paragraph, and within that paragraph, we're discussing two different texts. So we have a point-by-point comparison going on. And you can continue to read her comparison. And if you go down to her next paragraph, although the two films seem to agree on their choice of questionable facts, they disagree on their themes. So the introductory element is functioning as a transition, and then the independent clause, they disagree on their themes, is her topic sentence. Now, what I wrote to Ms. Payton is that she could have used some varied sentence structures at the beginning of her paragraphs to give her essay some variety. So just keep that in mind as you're writing your own, and also keep in mind that you do want to use quotes from movies and quotes from lyrics. So make sure that you don't just rely on summary. And you can continue to read throughout her paragraph. And let's look at her topic sentence for her next paragraph. Going from agreement to disagreement, the directors do both regarding Wonka's mental status. So we're into her next subclaim, and she varied her sentence structure here, and now she's going to talk about each of those directors. And you can continue to read this paragraph on your own, and then you get to her conclusion. So Ms. Hart did a block by block, and Ms. Payton did point by point. So there are different ways for you to organize your paper. You can even use both methods at once. You can discuss one topic in a paragraph, discuss a topic in another paragraph. The paragraph after that, you can discuss both topics by going point by point. So it's very important for you to know when to use block by block and point by point comparison for your papers. So let's look at Ms. Nelson's paper, the title, Prey and its Predator. Let's go down to her Works Cited page so that we will know what it is that we're reading about. So in arguing about literature, she is comparing Little Red Cap with Little Red Riding Hood. So Ms. Nelson decided to use the Red Riding Hood unit that we do for Composition 2, and she's doing a comparison of the story. Let's take a look at her title and her introductory paragraph. Prey and its Predator. For centuries, fairy tales have entertained young children with their unique narratives and underlying morals. With the 17th century came Charles Perrault, published stories or tales from the times past with morals, tales of Mother Goose, as well as Little Red Riding Hood. These stories entertain children with fairy tales. Perrault is joined in the late 18th and early 19th century by Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm. The Grimm brothers published children's and household tales, which included Little Red Cap. So she has an excellent introductory hook statement. She is introducing her topic, which are the two essays that she is analyzing. Please note here that her period should be within the quotation mark. So let's continue. Perrault and the Grimm brothers' fables originated from a timeless fairy tale that tells the story of a young girl who goes by the name Little Red Riding Hood. Perrault and the Grimms maintain the classic storyline for Red Riding Hood while constructing an underlying parable. These fables share commonalities and differences. The two themes, now there's the key word because for essay 2, themes is one of the things that you can compare. The two themes portrayed in both tales are similar, but the authors implement their arguments through different critical lenses. So we know that for Ms. Nelson's essay, we want to look for themes and critical lenses. Now that we've read her introduction, we want to go read her. Let's take a look at Ms. Nelson's conclusion. Everyone is familiar with the popular children's story about a young girl commonly known as Little Red Riding Hood. With this story comes many variations, two of which are very well known: Charles Perrault's Little Red Riding Hood and Jacob Wilhelm Grimm's Little Red Cap. In Perrault's tale, it becomes apparent that he believes young ladies must be careful of men with bad intentions and their sexuality, which can be analyzed through feminist and reader response lenses. In comparison, the Grimm brothers believe it is children who need to be cautious of outside danger, and because of their naivety, they must be obedient, which can simply be examined through a reader response lens. So there are a few things in the conclusion that I would change. Overall, it's written well. For example, the word everyone, probably not the best choice of qualifier. I would probably say most people are familiar with, because there could be people in other countries who have never heard of the story. And I probably would have added some links to it. Overall, though, it's well written. We know the things that she's looking at, and we know the two critical lenses that she's using for her essay. So let's go back and look at her body paragraph. So after reading her title, her introduction, and her conclusion, we know that we're looking for themes, we know we're looking for feminists, and reader response lenses. Let's look at the first body paragraph. Perrault makes it blatantly clear what the themes of Little Red Riding Hood is with his moral statement. Children, especially attractive, well-bred young ladies, should never talk to strangers, for if they should do so, they may provide dinner for a wolf, which directly follows the story. It seems as if Perrault means to aim this declaration towards children in general, but just after the first words, the readers are met with Perrault's true audience, attractive, well-bred young ladies. It is with this proclamation that becomes apparent what argument Perrault is attempting to make. In his story, Little Red Riding Hood stops to speak with a wolf who has lurking intentions. But Perrault reminds the audience that the poor child who did not know that it was dangerous to stay and talk to a wolf is only young and naive. He argues that young women need to be cautious in their endeavors because they make easy targets for predators. Perrault brings this to the surface through ingenious writing, which can be considered through a feminist critical lens. This lens will be examined later. So she's discussing a part of her argument, and then she brings up another part of her argument, but due to essay structure, she tells you that the feminist critical lens will be examined later on in the essay. So let's see what she does next. The audience can begin to assume the theme of the Grimm brothers tale Little Red Cap when she states, as long as she lives, she will never leave the path and run off into the woods by herself if mother tells her not to. This announcement by the young protagonist makes it seemingly clear that the Grimms believe children need to be obedient. Little Red Cap is easily strayed from her path when the wolf urges her, just look at the beautiful flowers that are all around them. So Miss Nelson looks at the first text. Now she's looking at the second text. And let's look at the very last sentence. This idea can be examined through a reader response lens. This lens will also be discussed later. So first she's discussing themes. And while she's discussing the themes, she's telling you, hey, this text can be discussed through a lens. And we'll get to that lens in a little bit. Let's look at the next topic sentence. Through different approaches, Perrault and Grimm brothers administer comparable moral themes to their readers. In Perrault's version of the fairy tale, he expresses his argument of being a caution towards alluring adolescent ladies. Meanwhile, in Grimm's fable, they urge the word caution more towards wide-eyed children who do not know any better. So before, you had block by block, and now you're getting point by point. So if you go to our next body paragraph, it's rather easy to analyze Perrault's Little Red Riding Hood through a feminist critical lens. Now you know that you've moved out of the theme and into the critical lens part of the essay. And if you go to the next, by examining through a reader response critical lens, the Grimm brothers' Little Red Cap. So she's back to that block by block structure. She's applying the critical lenses. And if we go to the next paragraph, ultimately, Perrault and Grimm brothers take on a timeless tale. So she's summarizing what she has been doing in her essay. So all of these essays are uploaded for you on Blackboard. You can look at them. They're not perfect. There are errors within these essays. But I do believe that they provide you with enough knowledge. There are enough examples for you to get an idea of how this differs from a rhetorical analysis. A rhetorical analysis only focuses on the components of argument, and we've already listed those previously in the video: thesis, subclaims, warrants, evidence, assumptions, appeals, which are logos, pathos, ethos. Essay 2 allows you to use components of arguments, but I want you to move out of that, and I want you to start using issues, which we discussed in class lecture, like fact, social, historical, cause and effect, etc., or critical lenses. Now, you've seen essays that have chosen different things to analyze, themes, critical lenses, etc. You've also seen these essays use course terminology like assumptions, evidence. So now it's time for you to brainstorm. What two texts do you want to analyze? How can you find where these texts are similar? How or what can you find that is different? If you have any questions, please let me know. So let's review. Please pick two texts, any essays from any of the course textbooks, or a movie that both of us have watched, or a song. You don't necessarily have to choose two of the same thing. You can mix genres if you like. You need to apply issues and lensing. If you would like, you can also apply one of the components of argument as one of your subclaims. Please see your course calendar for due dates. Make sure that you upload to discussion board the rough draft folder and that you bring printed stapled copies to peer review day. Please arrive to peer review day on time. Thank you for joining me for another online lecture. I hope that this has answered your questions. I'll see you next time.